Let's first of all be grateful for the beautiful land we're on, that spring has arrived, the groundhogs are out, and the robins are back, the blackbirds are back. It's all happening, thank goodness. And also remember that we're on the traditional territories and treaty lands of many Indigenous people. Here in Guelph, we're on the lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit, and they have an alliance with 6 nations, which I bring to your attention because the Mohawk Residential School was one of the longest running residential schools in Canada. It's up the road in 6 Nations land in Brantford. They have virtual tours every now and then, and just by coincidence, they have a virtual tour tonight at about 6:30. I thoroughly recommend it. It gives you a vivid view of what it was like to be a child in these terrible institutions, and it also helps explain why these institutions had such lasting effects on Indigenous well-being. And that's a very apposite topic for the seminar today, because welfare scientists like us understand as much as anyone how lasting effects of early experience can affect attributes like resilience. And today we're lucky enough to have a speaker who's some of whom's research specializes on this, and she'll be focusing on this on her talk today. So Linda Keeling is a professor of animal welfare at the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences. She has some Guelph connections, as many of you know. A while ago, she was Ian Duncan's PhD student, and she also did some postdoctoral work in Guelph. So welcome back, Linda. I know you've had a good few days here. So Linda's research is grouped into 3 main areas. One is on early experience and how that affects later behavior, the topic today. She also investigates emotional states in animals, especially positive ones. And she's also interested in the role of animal welfare in sustainable development, as many of you heard on Monday. And amongst her many achievements, she is a member of the Royal Swedish Academy of Forestry and Agriculture. She was former chair of the biology committee at the Swedish Academy of Sciences, which had me all excited that she was choosing Nobel Prizes. But that's Caroline's good. Damn, Linda. So close. She's also honorary doctor at the University of Linköping, which I'm probably pronouncing horribly. She's founding editor of the Animal Welfare and Policy section in Frontiers of Animal Science, and she does lots of policy work herself, especially at the level of Europe. So she's an independent expert in the EU platform on animal welfare. She's been a member of the Animal Health and Welfare Panel of EFSA, and she's currently on their working group in broilers. And she's also doing a lot of work elevating farm animal welfare to not just make it neutral, but actually to make it good, something which is a fantastically welcome concept. So without further ado, Linda, welcome. I'm so excited to hear your talk.
Thank you very much for that introduction. It was like the whole of the CV, putting up all the best things that I've ever done. So thank you for that. Okay, let's move on. I should move on here. Where's that one? Nope, not that one either. You jump one more. Here we are. Okay, so it is a really huge pleasure to be here. I've had a fantastic few days here meeting all the students, and I recognize some familiar faces, and to be back on the facility, some new buildings, and some things just haven't changed after all these years. So really great to be back here. As you heard, I'm going to be talking about effects of early experience on the welfare of animals, and it just the title, Preparing for Life. This is young people, young animals, and life ahead. Do you recognize this sport? Everybody's nodding. What do you call it? Curling, yeah. So there's a Danish philosophy or psychologist here who coined the term curling parents to refer to those parents who sort of sweep away and make it easy for their children. I think I've been heard that they're called helicopter parents. Well, they're called curling parents in Sweden. And you get the similarity with the sweeping of the way and all this type of thing. And the question I want to raise is, are we protecting our animals too much? Are we being curling managers and owners of animals, or helicopter caretakers, whatever terminology you want? We mean well, but are we in the end doing what is best for the animals? So that's going to be the topic here. We rear them in rather clean heterogeneous and stable environments. We don't want any sort of infections or things. We want it very standardized so they can easily find their way around. And we keep it very calm and very stable. Nothing changes, whatever. Yet that's very different from the natural environment in which they evolve, because nature changes all the time. I mean, I never know here in what I should put on in the morning, because it seems to go from rain to cold wind to bright sunshine in the afternoon. And that's just one day in Guelph. So very different. We'll come back to that here. Yet we know that experienced adversity can help develop resilience and coping mechanisms. And there's a review paper here that takes up these things if you want to get quickly into all the papers in the area. So some adversity early on is good. So this sort of curling parents or helicopter parents should let their children fall over occasionally, but you should be responsible, because I mean, there are many examples of the negative effects of the early experience of adversity. And that's what Georgia was referring to here. So the question is there a balance between being overprotective of our animals? Well, that's good in some ways, but maybe we're not preparing them for the future, or not giving them the opportunity to make the most out of their lives, even if you're a chicken. So I know you all know this, and I know you recognize the guy up there. The giraffes are just because it's a nice picture. I'm not going to be talking about giraffes, but I think this is a nice one about adaptation to the environment. I'm going to be talking about farm animals, and more specifically about chickens. But you know the story. They evolve in these environments, whether it's your jungle fowl or your wild boar, and you develop these behaviors that have been essential for survival. And these are the ones that we try and give them in the environment. So we should provide material so they can dust bathe, and this pig with a nest building behavior, because over evolution, it's just been essential to take care of your young, but also to take care of your plumage, because if you're a chicken, you need to be able to escape and fly away and not be eaten up so you can have offspring. So you recognize all this story from the introductions. And I'm just going to put up these relevant concepts just because I might come back to them, and because I would like a discussion afterwards. I feel this is very much an opportunity for me to get feedback from you. So these are the terms that I'm sure you'll recognize of things, but adaptability is sort of, well, some species are more adapted than others. You know, we have pigs are very flexible and they adapt to different situations. They eat many different types of food. Chickens as well can adapt, whereas other animals require a very stable and a very consistent life. A panda is only eating one type of food. So, I mean, you get the variation of the characteristics of the species and then of the individual, how adaptable they are. Then we have this term developmental plasticity. So this is when you can develop to be more flexible in your way you handle things. Are you a person who likes control? We said we're going to do this and now we're going to do it. Or, you know, do you sort of wait and see what will happen, keep your options open, maybe gets a better offer later, these types of things. So it's sort of the opposite of being brainwashed. You have the opportunity to select things. And then we have this word agency, sort of like autonomy, whereas individuals' inherent motivation to engage with its environment. And this has been discussed by Percival Marek Spinker and different categories. But the one that farm animals seem to fall into is about the competence building agency. So they're not simple stimulus response, and maybe we can discuss how much they're having a self-awareness and things, but definitely they fall in this one here of the farm animals, competence building agency, actively behaving to build skills and acquire information for later use. And there we're back again to the helicopter parents. If you're a helicopter caretaker, are you allowing your animals to develop the competencies that they will need for later in life? So, given those terms, can we use the knowledge that we have from zoology, from behavioral ecology, from the psychology about how to better prepare young laying hens? So now I'm coming into the topic that I want to, because as you know that pullets can have problems when they move to the laying house. And I know there are several projects on that going on here now. How can we make it so that they have that transition as smooth as possible? And I mean, the advice is, well, rear them in the same environment. If they're going to be kept in cages, rear them in cages. If they're going to be kept in aviaries, rear them in aviaries. Yes, but there are many different types of aviaries. Actually, they're getting quite a lot of different types of cages as well. So the question is, would it be better to focus on general abilities, general skills, or generic skills, rather than, well, they're red drinkers and they're here and their perch is like that and they're over there, just so that the animal has these basic skills to need. What I'm going to do is give you on a little research journey that sort of, I don't know, falls off down here, but that's where you're going to help me. And I'm going to talk about where we started off with this dilemma of this adversity and enrichment, a little bit there. And then I'll be following and presenting very quickly 4 experiments that sort of build up a bit of a story and then leave with more questions than answers. But that's what research is all about. And in particular, I want to thank Lena Sconeberry, because most of these experiments were part of her PhD thesis, which you can see there. And I've taken, of course, some of her slides, but this is an area that we are working in, and I'll talk a little bit very briefly about some of the projects that we're just starting now. So let's take about this first one where we started a long time ago. We know about that enrichment has beneficial effects. It's clear, there's lots of research on it. It has to be biologically relevant. You can't just throw in anything, but a lot of work on this, and it nearly always shows that there are advantages. What we wanted to do was to find out how the enriched environment would buffer you against something that happened earlier. So if something tragic happens or bad happens, like cold stress here on transport to the farm, your truck breaks down and it's winter or something, could then go into an enriched environment help you handle it better than going into a standard environment? And does it work the future as well? If I'm living in an enriched environment, am I going to be able to cope with stresses in the future? So when something happens in the barn, the lighting, electricity goes off, they need some repairs, there's suddenly things happening. So this is our experiment here. So you can see the, or you would if you didn't have this meeting is being recorded at the top, but
Okay.
well, it's not, I don't see it on my screen, so I have to find where okay is. No, and I don't see the cursor here, so there's no connection between, it doesn't matter. It's not so exciting.
Keep I'll.
And you could move me from there, because I'm blocking my own next slide. So, thank you. So you can see the simple one, litter on the floor for the little chicks. So there are some little chicks at the front there, not very easy to see. Thank you. And then also we have our enriched environment. And that nice curtain material there is a shelter for them, which is representing a bush, but we couldn't pull a bush in there or a tree or anything. It's just a little bit of a shelter underneath the perch with some curtain strips hanging down, and then some an A-frame of perches and some other things in the front. So we had just our 2 simple, an enriched and unenriched environment. And yes, we found differences here, that if we had half of the chicks that were cold stressed and half not cold stressed, and then half went into the enriched environment and half not enriched. So there, you can imagine how it divides up. Yeah, so we have the immunology. So we did get some beneficial effects of going into an enriched environment for the chicks that had been cold stressed. So there were some benefits there. And you can read about that more, and all the other things that were not significant and some things that tended to be significant in the paper there by Irene. And then also later on, we had a very nice fun selecting what loud music and heavy rock we were going to play them, and the intermittent schedule and the lighting scheme. And it so happened that they did need to do some repairs with the heating system. So they got a realistic type of stressor. And then later on, we did a cognitive judgment bias test, and the birds that didn't have the enrichment reacted to the, gave the indication of being more, showed a negative judgment bias, maybe more pessimistic than the birds that had experienced the intermittent stressor but had been in an enriched environment. So this was sort of positive, yes, enrichment, and this is good. But do we really, if we go back to that, the beneficial effects of adversity, do we really want to be exposing our birds to adversity? I'm professor in animal welfare and I cold stress my chicks and then I frighten them with heavy metal music and intermittent. I mean, it doesn't feel the right way to be approaching the thing. And what is it in this enrichment? I mean, can we do it more systematically? I mean, we just put in the things that we thought, but is there a pattern in there? What do we need to be doing? So go on to another concept or ideas that you're probably familiar with, and that's the ones of controllability and predictability. Normally, this is related to stress. If you can't control your environment and it's an unpredictable environment, that's like double whammy. This is very stressful for the individual. But if we think about controllability, that's actually being able to have a choice. I can control what I want to eat by choosing to eat that and not that because I don't like raw onion or whatever. And then we have this other way around. We have change. Because going to be completely predictable, well, that's boring. That's actually one of our challenges that we talk about, that maybe they were keeping our animals in a too stable environment. But we know that then being completely unpredictable is part of the stress, but maybe by having some sort of change, we can create a more stimulating environment. So early experience change also could prepare for later change. And my original question there was, can we prepare birds for moving to another house so they have a smoother adaptation? Thanks. So exploring the potential of choice and change as a way to provide enrichment. Okay, so that's the theme that's going through. So here I am on my journey now. Got a very good and nice PhD student. We start off on experiment number 1. What are we going to change? And what are we going to control in the environment or give choice of? And we decided, well, litter and perches. This is well documented as being important for animals. So here we have our range of different litter materials that we use, all used occasionally in the poultry industry. So we weren't coming up with anything weird, but the standard is wood shavings. But some places are using straw and some places are using sand. And then we have these different perches. And so we had the standard round wooden perches, but also, since we have a lot of horses in Sweden, it was quite easy to have a leading rein, and we plaited one and we have a single one. So just different types of perches. So those are the important resources that are already required in the legislation. And we found out that chicks, they're not stupid, even as 1 week old. They know what they like, and they start to choose to dust bathe in peat and sand. I mean, we know this type of thing. They perched initially on the wide rope, easier maybe, and also tended to hang a little bit lower. And they preened more on the wide, flat perches than on the rope. I mean, if you're preening and got your head here, you want to be on something quite stable, not sort of woo, balancing around. So this was not really sort of unexpected results. It was just interesting that they were doing this so early on. And we also found that perch width and shape were quite important of when they were jumping around. I mean, it's difficult to land on a swinging rope, as many young chicks found out of things. And they were more successful on the more stable things. So that you can read around as well. But the important thing, and what we took from that is, okay, we can use these. This is going to maybe be, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. These are things that are out there. They're okay for chickens. You know, the industry is not going to be too concerned about putting these things in. It's the principle of it, but these are resources that they do use. So this is what things that we vary in the future studies. So yes, on to experiment 2. We decided to start a little bit small scale, and it's much easier just to give choice and then observe your animals than it is to go in changing things around. So we started off by giving them a choice of different litter and perch materials. So similar to the first study, but now super organized. So here you can see we have wood shavings here, and they have the rope. And we have the peat on the floor and the platform here with wire, sand and wood and straw and rubber. And we knew from the preference tests early on which were the preferred. So we tended to put a preferred with a not preferred. So things were balanced out there as much as possible. And then also we have this where they have the choice. So the same floor material because of their small chicks and a cold concrete floor. And then you can see the little trays. We do a lot of shopping at IKEA in Swedish experiments. You know, these are the things that you have to put in your boots on when you come out from outside in, with the 4 different types. So balancing it as much as possible so that the idea was the choice, not what exactly you have the choice between. So no choice here and a choice in the top row. And then we did this variety of behavior and immunological incomes. And I'm actually, as I go through my little journey here on the different experiments, I'm also going to be dropping in these tests and measures that we use, because some work and some we like and continue to use, and maybe they're of interest to you in your studies in the future as well. So the first one with this one was that we got the choice one. They had more natural antibodies, so definitely more prepared to cope with a challenge. And I mean, we know all about gut microflora and microbiota, being prepared with the immune system. So it's not really surprising that if you give animals more choice, and they may be scratching and ingesting a few more things, that their immune system is better prepared to, yes, we can do it. So a very significant difference there, with the choice, which is the orange, being better in that, more prepared. Then we had the classic heterophil lymphocyte ratio, which some of you may be involved in, also good. So with the no choice, they had an increased risk for chronic stress, so significant difference there. And then the last one, tonic immobility, which is not a test that I tend to use so very often, but it's where you put the bird on its back and then leave it. And it's the last stage of an anti-predator response, when everything else is lost, you couldn't run away, you couldn't fight, play dead. And then you record the time taken for the chicken to right itself. And the choice ones were faster up and to potentially escape. And the summary is that when you do the discriminant analysis on the individuals, from the analysis, you could see so clearly which treatment they came from. You can see that the choice and the no choice, and you can see what are the results that were significant there. So improved immune potential, indicators of diminished fear and stress responses. So this was looking good. We also wanted to sort of think a little bit more of how to explore the ability of chicks to adapt to routine procedures, because also that's it. People are coming in and out and things are changing when they move to the laying house system. So we wanted to have something that sort of investigated fear, exploration, learning, something vaguely along that line. And we came up with this idea that we call the repeated challenge test. Really just involves mealworms and a person, but it sounds so much better to call it a repeated challenge test. So it starts off with, so this is the pen arrangement, and you can see we have the far end, the middle, and the near. And in the first stage, a person just opened the door, put the bowl in, also from IKEA, and recorded the number of birds near the bowl and the number of mealworms eaten. So the mealworms were, 10 mealworms were buried in the pellets there. But then on the next time, from terriles 4 to 6, the person came in, but they actually sat down there with a bowl on their lap here. So that, of course, is much more scary. It's a person, but now they know what the bowls contain. So it's a bit complicated, but just to look through. So we have the first time. So here are the choice birds and the no choice birds. And you can see that the first time, the second time, and the third time, there are quite a high proportion of birds coming forward. I mean, it's just a bowl and they're curious of it. And also in the no choice. And then when it becomes more scary, when the person is in there, whoa, much lower proportion of birds there. So both groups go, now this is more challenging on these next ones. But the difference is that over time, and this is the proportion of mealworms eaten, when it gets more challenging in this 4th, 5th, and 6th challenge, it's only the choice birds that actually get better. So a greater proportion of them are actually coming close to that second bowl with the new mealworms in, and being more successful in eating their proportion of mealworms. So fewer. So again, an effect of having the choice is making them cope with this better, be more, and actually get a reward, the mealworms. This, I don't know, what's the rule? Okay. So we'll take questions later. Okay, and so, sorry, I should have clicked on that. So this is just saying that the choice, there is a difference, they are improving, whereas in the no choice, didn't get any better. So in the summary bit, so the choice chicks, you can sort of phrase it, they maybe had the advantage of growing up in this more stimulating environment with different resources to sort of pick and choose between to control what they want to do, allowing for optimal development regarding coping capacity studies. Okay, that sounds nice. Or the alternative is we just gave them a chance to develop more normally. Because if I go back to this original idea, if we are not giving our birds, our young chicks in this case, such a standard and heterogeneous and predictable environment, maybe they're just not developing to their potential that they would in nature, because nature is very variable. So maybe all we've done with our thing is to bring it a little bit more to a normal rearing environment, and they're reaching their potential in that way. And also highlighting there, more stimulating. Well, was it really? I mean, I don't know, but it's a little bit, but maybe it's nothing like as much as what they should have in nature. Or maybe it was already a little bit too much. We don't know. And this idea for the optimum development. What is the optimum development? Do we want to maximize it, or is there a trade-off here? So these are things that I will be coming back to. But again, we were still looking positive about the potential of giving birds quite simple choices and quite feasible choices to do. It's not like advanced stuff here. It's just a couple of different pieces of wood or a couple of different litters. So we carry on to number 3. So, okay, now we've done the choice. Let's add in change. So exploring choice and change, because maybe if you give both, we get even better results, because that's the controllability and the predictability part of it. And just to put you up this diagram, reminding you of it. So now we're sort of putting these two together. Don't be frightened by this diagram. I will walk you through it. So if we take the top row, this is, other than we now have a nice color scheme, that's the multi-choice and the single choice from the previous experiment. So the single choice, they had maybe wood shavings and a rope, or they maybe had the sand and the bar. So the same, no choice. And then I showed you the pictures where we had all 4 different types of litter and all 4 different types of perches. So that first row is the same as in the first experiment. But now we added that we changed things around. So here, they've got all 4, and all we did was move them around in places, okay? Choice of them. And then when there's a single, then we just change to a different one. So now we have added, choice, and change in a systematic way, balancing as much as possible for our different what you're actually choosing between, and that all the birds experience all the same treatments. So you can't say they never experienced sand or they never experienced the rope. All experienced it. The difference is whether you could choose at a moment in time or not, or whether it changed over time. Took a lot of lab meetings to decide on that experimental design. So please don't underestimate the benefits of discussing your experimental design in a group and getting feedback. Yes. I'm also just going to throw in 2 different tests that we did again. So I talked about that repeated challenge test with the person sitting there with the bowl of mealworms. It's cheaper experiments if you do them for a shorter period of time. So the first one was just for 3 weeks. This was for 7 weeks, but still we are interested in the laying period. So we did a pretend move to the laying house. So this was the novel pen where the birds got moved in, and they moved from their treatment into this pen as a group. They have a start tray that they start on, and they have to go on to different types of litter, which is like scary on the floor. There are different types of perches that they've never seen before, never seen the litter types before. And the food is raised up on a wire platform, and they've never experienced a wire floor before, and it was so everything was different of that. And then we take a tip from the laboratory side with the laboratory animals, where you just design an environment and you get everything all in one. So we have this sort of multivariate test where you start off your chicken here, and it's looking towards its cage mates in the middle there, but it can't walk directly towards them because there's netting. It has to work out that I have to go back, walk around, and go in this way. So it's a simple detour test. So you're getting the freezing until they start to move again, and some of you would have seen that in your chickens. Then they have to solve the detour. Then once they're in this other one, they can walk straight to their companions and hang out with them. But also you can move around in the outer area and explore. And in that outer area, because of the barriers, sometimes you can see your companions, but sometimes they can go out of view. And that can also be a little bit scary as well. So it's sort of an open field meets detour test, meets exploratory. And you can gather in a lot of different information about this, and you can put the chicks through in a quick way. So it's actually, we found this and my reversal learning test, I think, are really good tests to separate out treatments, things. So what are the results and the conclusions here? This is just to show you up in the top corner, the treatment. So we have in the bottom left, or I should start off with the axes. Always explain your axes when you're giving a presentation. So on the x-axis, we have environmental change. So the white one is the non-changing single choice. And then you go on the x-axis and then you've got the changing single choice. So that's the changing axis. Then the y-axis, you have the white one, which is the non-changing single choice, but you go up and now you've got the non-changing multiple choice. And then of course the nice flag there of one is when you have both of them. So if you change, so we go along the x-axis, so going from the white to the yellow, this resulted in reduced initial freezing in the multivariate test, reduced fear, a few other things came up, but that's the one. It really feels very logical. If you're growing up in an environment where things change, you get a bit used, a bit chilled, you know, it's changing, so what, don't have to be frightened just now. So it's a logical result of that. And then if you go from greater choice, so this is going up from the white to the blue, resulted in shorter latencies to solve the detour test, and also more movement in the novel area and less spatial clustering. They're not all together going like this, staying together in the safety. They spread out a little bit more, suggesting improved spatial skills and higher exploration, which is also quite logical when you think about it, because now you never know what may be over there, maybe even better food or more exciting things or super jumbo sized mealworms or whatever it is that's attractive in a chick's life that you should go and explore about. So again, it seems a very biologically relevant thing. Combining both though, so we go across the diagonal here, didn't result in any further improvements over and above what we can achieve for the section ones. So either, and this is a very definite, either it was just too much, now it was like too stimulating, this is too much going on, or maybe we didn't get the balance right, because who knows if our change in our choice one, maybe they're not, we don't have any idea of whether they're equivalent and how would you even look at it of things. But the conclusion we draw from that one is that change and choice both have different positive but non-synergistic effects on adaptability potential. That in nature, that having the possibility to choose is quite good, but also having some sort of change in the environment can be quite good. But it doesn't necessarily, and you're getting these, they're having effects on different skills, not necessarily that you have some new wonder skill that comes up if you experience both. But it's very difficult in these ones to know what the equivalence is. So the last experiment that I want to talk about here. Okay, so choice and change are good, but when do you need this? Logically, you would think it was most important when the chick was really small. That's when the brain's developing, and that's when like the world is a oyster. This when everything's going to happen. You would think that that was important, and that would be really neat if you could just say, yes, treat your chicks like this for the first 3 weeks, and then life as usual, and you'll get the benefits later on. But knowing that life doesn't work like that, and there are times later on and puberty when things happen, or, I mean, we decided we needed to look at this a little bit more for the practical implication of it. So here we have, I probably should be explaining this. Perhaps it's only necessary early in life to first develop, but also if we did that, would you be losing the resource? And maybe that's more traumatic to have had something and lost it than to never have had it at all. So these are the experiments that you can see again. So this is the early, this is how it looked. Shopping in IKEA again for their new larger containers because the chick birds are bigger there, but it's still the same principle. We just don't have the material around it. So these are the intermediate time, the teenage years, and then they go into our standard facilities here, which is a terrible picture, I'm sorry, but you can see there's a slatted floor here, and then down here is a litter area. This is the perches. There are nest box here. You can see feeders in the middle and a drinker here. So everything was different. And this time we did keep them later on. And this is how the design looks. If you want to use our little colored dots and things again. So they started off as either multi-choice or single choice. And then, because remember now we're only doing the change. And then we had some that went multi-choice to multi-choice. So that's the best of all worlds through the whole of your life and into the standard pen, or from single choice, there. So that would be the life as usual and how producers would normally have it. And then we have this switch over where you gain something here, you go gaining it later in life, or in the top one, you've lost it in the middle. So there were, I think there were some long-term effects. So we did find some, but it seemed to vary according to the skill that we were looking at. So the group that never experienced choice, so they were the ones that went single choice for the first 4 weeks, single choice for 7 to, and then, so that's the sort of standard ones, were slowest to spread out over the pen. I mean, guess where the door is and where we put the birds in. We just opened it, put the birds in, and they stayed there. Whereas the others are like, yes, okay, where can I go? What can I do? So that was a very clear result, and that was like choice anytime. Right? Then the next one is that birds reared with choice early in life were quicker to use the perches and the raised nests. So more exploration, quicker to take opportunities. So they were, you didn't see it on the picture, but as well as the perches, we had those shoe things that we had bought in IKEA that were in the experiment. Now they were hung up on the wall as shells with a little rim around as a sort of a raised nesting platform area. So it could be there quicker, but also there's a lot of research to show the importance of getting access to 3-dimensional space early in life. That perches, you have to give them perches early in life, otherwise they just never get this 3-dimensional space thing. They're always poorer later on. So maybe we're just tapping into that. It would have been good to have had something else that could look at more exploration, quicker to take opportunities, that was not really linked to abilities to move around in 3-dimensional space. I think that would have been a better design, something more for the future. And then having choice in the juvenile, so you were just the teenage time, so you didn't get this at the start, you were the single, but then you got all this like just when you were, yes, teenage years. Then we got the better plumage, even as adults, so something was going on there. And we got, but again, the explanations of it, it could mean there's less feather pecking, but I have to admit, we didn't have very much feather pecking. It's more like scruffy feathers and things like that. So we think it was to do with dust bathing, because as I'll show you, we picked that up, and I call it the peat effect. It was quite clear those birds that had access to the peat material, they did a lot of dust bathing in that, and it really did. They just, I should use it on my hair more often or something. It really did seem to be a good for plumage. So I think we need to look at this a little bit more. But there were things going on there. And this was another person, another PhD student that was working together with us, Regina Holt. She was looking at the behaviors that they were showing. And if you group them together, I know it's difficult to know what are positive behaviors and what are negative behaviors, but it seemed to be that we got a higher levels of the positively valenced behavior, things like play and dust bathing as juveniles, and lower levels of the negative ones, like feather pecking or aggressive pecking, when you had a choice. So experience of choice anytime, whether you had it early or later or all the way through, it seemed that from a welfare point of view, the few indicators that we perhaps think are positive or negative, it seemed to be having a good effect there. So choice during rearing, yes, tick this one off. It seems a good way, and I would hope that it's quite a practical way. We're not asking for additional things to be added. It's just instead of putting exactly the same of something, just vary it a little bit. And that's if you choose this litter or buy 100% of that litter or 25% or 25% and spread it around a bit. I show you some pictures later. It shouldn't necessarily be a higher cost because you're going to have to buy those perches anyway, or that litter anyway. So our ongoing journey. So Lena successfully defended her PhD. And we're now looking at broiler breeders, collaborating with the industry there, and a particular rearer who's very enthusiastic about this. So he's given a choice of litter material and perches to his rearing birds, and now we're following those through. I'll show you a picture of that in the next slide. So Lena is carrying on in that part. Then we've gone back to the original thought, that very first experiment I told you with the nice flowery curtains with the shelter, because we were looking at choice, controllability, but we never really explored this of shelter and safety. That's also positive, to be able to sort of go out, have fun, and then go back to your safe place and relax or chill out or whatever. So another person, Josephina Zidar, who'd actually done the cognitive judgment bias test early on, she's doing a much larger project now, looking at these functional areas. Can we sort of make the areas biologically relevant and still sort of give choice and things, but bring in that with security and safety, and not just, you know, how to get a optimally stimulating environment, not too much and not too little. That, they call it Goldilocks spot in the middle. So she's introducing this part of security. So that's a nice and a large project that she's the principal investigator on. And then we've gone over to pigs. And this is a person called Else Veerbeck, done some work with pigs before and gut microbiota. And now we're giving little piglets the choice to push through a swing door, a weighted door, and get into a room where there's a choice of different feed, or to push and get to another space where there's food, but there's no choice of it. So multi-choice, no choice. But now it's pigs. And that's an experience when pigs get excited and rush through and things. So that's a very nice one. And that's a large project that Elsa is the PI on there. So that's the ongoing journey. And we can ask questions about what I've said and things, and I can refer you to the papers. That's what I put up. But I thought it would be very nice to, not very nice for me anyway, to get some discussions and input on what we're doing here. So I think the practical part, giving choice and relevant resources, has many welfare benefits, doesn't necessarily cost the farmer money. So here is what I'm going to say. So this is the rearing, the commercial broiler breeding rearing farm. This is now the garden. No, we've gone from IKEA to garden centres now. So this is one of these garden centres, and you build them up and then plant your potatoes in them or your salad. You recognise it. And then we have different ones. You can see one there and another one. So they're just in the middle there with the different types of litter in them. And these are the types of perches that he normally gives his broiler breeders, and he just turned them on their side. So that's why they look a little bit spaceshipy thing, because it's just these ones and turned to be different. And there are also hanging ones on ropes, so they're swinging. So this now can be hung from the ceiling. So, I mean, not a big change for him. And he gets paid anyway for helping us. But no, he's a very good farmer and very enthusiastic about this. But to come back to the thinking about it here, what are we doing here? Do we really understand? I don't feel I've understand what we've done with our experiments. It's nice, we've got a PhD thesis out of it. Yes, say to the industry, we think this has benefits, but I do come back to, you know, the question of it and what are we achieving here? For example, have we improved adaptability, as I say, or are we just no longer limiting it? Have we, this idea of the curling parents or the helicopter parents? I mean, is that correct? Does this support this here now? Or have we sort of improved it? They were already quite adaptable and now we've given them super adaptability powers or whatever. So, I mean, I think somewhere of this, the relative thing would be interesting to explore of this one. Would choice in more resources, I mean, we just talked about litter and perches because they have to be provided. But I mean, we're talking about shelter. There's other things that you could have, and the choice in the lighting. You can go to a lighter place or a darker place. That's also a thing that we're looking at with the shelter. So would that be better? Or is it that learning to make a choice, that's the competence? It doesn't really matter what you're choosing between. It's just, I can do it. I have that freedom. I have that agency, as we talk about things. And I think this idea came up from somebody who's involved in a lot of dog training. And then when we tried to train the university beagles, who are trained to just grit your teeth and bear it and hope the student finds the vein. This was, I mean, there's a difference. Animals and humans, you learn to learn. You learn how to pick things up quickly. If you've learned some languages, you can pick up other ones. You see patterns of how to do it. Is being able to make a choice, that competence that Marek Spinker was talking about, that we should be giving the animals, or should we be giving them more choice of important things? So you can choose your personal profile barn with the optimal litter, the optimal perch, lighting, design a barn for you, whatever. So this is a question I think that's of interest and relevance for the industry. Can we keep it quite simple and still have adaptable birds? Or do we need to be going more towards the individual bird and its needs and requirements? And then how does, and I already touched on it, sorry, jumping ahead on my own slides here. How does the concepts of agency and development plasticity relate to adaptability? I think this with development plasticity and the brain and everything, this is, and how the animals are developing their skill and how long lasting it is. I think this is really interesting as well. So I think it was Lena did a fantastic job and doing in this project, and we've now got interest and we're following on and expanding it to other areas. But I think there's time to take a step back and also reassess the fundamentals of it and think about how can we do this better? How can we do it smarter? And what does this tell us about the brain and the adaptability of developmental plasticity in our farm animals? And with that, I say thank you very much. And I have another slide that I shall put up just so you can look at it. They told me this one to advertise. Yes. So the North American Regional Meeting.